Oh no. I think okay. Live chat. Just people will start logging in, so you can probably start talking, but there's only 12 people.
Hello, can anybody see me? Are we live here? My screen looks really dark. How does my screen look? Does it look dark? Whatever, we're going to start. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining in here. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody. I just wanted to say, first of all, unfortunately, I felt a little bit under the weather. Like a lot of you that have kids, they're probably bringing stuff home from school. So I'm not sure if that what happened to me, but like I almost pulled the rip cord on this because I'm not feeling well. But you know what? I couldn't let the team down, so I had to come down and pull it off. Proud of our Christmas tree this year.
Well,
Huddy's throwing stuff down the stairs. Anyways, yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really have any plans on things that I'm going to, I see everybody join in here. Hey, welcome everybody. I can see names popping up of people commenting. So yeah, have I gone to see the doctor? Negative. But yeah, I only got sick yesterday. So, or the day before.
From your last video.
You mean, Tori saying, have I gone to see the doctor from my last video? Yeah, I did. And you know, what the doctor told me. So what somebody's talking about here is in my second to last video, I had this like crazy weird thing happen to me while I was camping with my family on the French River. And I just felt like I was going to faint. I had like no energy. I was dizzy. I couldn't I don't know, really dizzy, but I just had like basically weak. And I had like kind of pins and needles feelings in my hands and a little bit in my head and face. And I couldn't paddle. And I was worried I was going to like fall over out of the canoe and that. And I ended up kind of feeling better after Tori paddled soloing as me lying there listlessly in the front of the cactus point in the river. But I ended up basically my doctor said that, you know, what she told me is she thought it was some sort of exasperated condition to do with a concussion I had. So like the week before on another trip, I slipped and fell and bashed my head. Actually, it was probably looked pretty funny. I landed on the gunnel of the canoe and then the other gunnel came up and hit me in the head. And like I got up right away. It was okay. But I immediately started noticing I was all messed up. And then I was super busy because I was in the middle of filming, you know, a new show that me and Tori. I can't give away too much, but me and Tori have something coming up into the new year. You might see some new stuff. So I was super busy doing all of that, and basically. You know, didn't give it the rest. I was working out. I was on these trips and everything like that. And then that day where I had that crazy thing where I felt like fainting and all that, it was, I think, 38 degrees out. And I was in the blazing sun and I was carrying stuff down to the canoe and loading it and bent over. I could just really feel that sun taking the soul out of me. Which, you know, some might argue gingers don't even have to begin with. But anyways, definitely we can all agree that gingers aren't the best in the sun. So yeah, I you know, my doctor said it was sort of exasperation of my concussion symptoms, that I'd had these concussion. It wasn't like severe, but then, you know, stress, lack of sleep, and the heat exhaustion. I don't really know if just exasperated concussion symptoms, really, if that's a thing. So I think it was just like a heat exhaustion, like a heat stroke thing that happened to me. You know, maybe that was more prevalent from my concussion, but, you know, I thought of all kinds of things like having a stroke, like Chris Letang, who plays for the Penguins. he had like 2 strokes. So it's something that can happen to younger people or people that are in shape, which I'm neither one, but just kidding. But sort of. Yeah. So, but that's something that typically affects one side of your body. So you feel on one side of your face, you can't smile on both sides, or you can't raise both hands equally. And none of that was happening to me. It wasn't a panic attack or like a anxiety attack from by definition. So yeah, just some weird thing. But I'm totally fine now. That was in September, and I've done a whole ton of things. I don't know if you've been following the other series I'm running, but me and Tori and with the whole family, we drove the Trans-Labrador Highway. We jumped over to Newfoundland. This is going to be coming up, and we climbed up Grossmore Mountain with the kids on my back. Grossmore Mountain is geez, I don't know. I forget what it is. Something like 1,800 meters and 1,850 maybe. And, it was like a 18-kilometer round trip hike that we did in the day. So clearly I'm not, being affected by that too much anymore. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah, I guess what I was saying is I didn't really have anything at all planned. There's Tori. Hey, honey. There's a light. Tori's basically the brains behind this operation. You know how like a lot of the time it's like, the dude, the husband that's like, oh, I know how to work the TV. I get the football game going. Okay. And my family that like me and Tori, like that's all Tori. I just like don't even know how to work television. Like I never even grew up with a TV. I don't think my parents are against TV, but my dad like got in an argument with the cable company and just like canceled it forever. And all we had was like global, so we could watch like Hockey Night in Canada, but there'd be like 2 people because of the reception of the TV and just like rabbit ears. So that's like basically where I still am when it comes to that kind of technology. I'm just gonna have a beer here because I haven't had any at all alcohol because I don't think it's good when you're sick. But yeah, but right now it's just gonna make me feel a little bit better. So that's a Bose. Good Canadian small business, a couple of Bose lug tread. I think they just got bought out by Steam Whistle too. So success story. But anyways, yeah, so absolutely really no plans at all for this live. So I guess I'm gonna do a live chat. Hey Tor, yeah, can you field this? Sorry, could you field this? Somebody's asking me a question here. Anyways, yeah, no what was I going to say? No real plan. So I guess I'm just going to do a Q&A. I see one thing pop up saying, what made you go with the ZR2? I have the ZR1 now and I feel I need to upgrade, LOL. So so basically what happened with the ZR2 that I have, amazing truck, but I had to give it back. So I was working on something with General Motors, and they basically lent me the truck to use for this trip, essentially to promote their vehicle. So when I gave it back at the end when it was all over, which wasn't the easiest. It was pretty sweet. I drive a Dodge Ram. I'm not really a brand guy when it comes to vehicles so much. I've had some good luck with Toyota, good luck with Dodge, and then this GM was incredible. So I guess I just kind of lucked into that. I had no idea GM Chevrolet was going to let me use such a sweet truck, like, you know what I mean? So anyways, but it was super off-road, probably the most off-road capable full-size pickup arguably ever sold in North America. So I was happy to drive it. Anyways, yeah. So I guess what I said I'm gonna do is just like Q&A. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, go ahead and ask. Some of them that are just like, let's try to keep things relative to like outdoors and whatnot for the most part. Sort of on brand. Actually, somebody's saying, I'm glad you're in Labrador in the fall. 0 flies. Awesome series so far. You should see the last episode that just went live last night. We finally busted out our drone, and we ended up getting a lot of really cool drone shots, and finally got into Labrador and took some sort of back trails into a couple beautiful spots. And we saw Churchill Falls, which is a massive waterfall. Unfortunately, most of the time, the flow over it is greatly reduced because of the Churchill Falls generating station. It diverts most of the water that goes over the falls, but it was such a high water year. We saw the thing rushing, and the preceding canyon. Well, it basically pours into this gorgeous freaking canyon. And so that was super, super cool. And we did that hike on the way there. So yeah, we end up more to come on that. Not too long. We jump over to Newfoundland. We end up doing some off-roading on some just 2-track quad trails near Blanc Sablon, and a bunch of fun stuff happened. So, and then
pinned message there?
Yeah, I can't really see it. I just see somebody made a donation. Tori's supposed to be helping me field messages, but our son Hudson is having a bit of a meltdown upstairs.
I'm gonna pin
He's not to be
questions
trusted.
here,
Yeah.
and then once you answer them, I'll replace it. So just click and you'll see the question.
So I just got a question here. It said my 9-year-old son, who might be my biggest fan, is wanting to know if I'm planning any polar expeditions. I'm not I don't have any like winter polar expeditions planned. Although this winter I'm going to be doing like come February, I'm going to be doing a serious, 2-week-long snowshoe expedition to cross the Temagami region. So we're just going to be winter camping along the way. I'm going to bring my dog North. I'm going to be doing it with a couple another pretty big outdoor YouTuber. Pretty big. He's pretty big outdoor YouTuber. And another buddy of mine that people that are on Instagram may know from there. So so excited to do that. And then in the summer, it's not 100% sure yet, but I'm looking at doing a super remote Arctic canoe expedition in the Barren Lands down a whitewater river that lies well above the Arctic Circle. So I guess the answer is yes to that question. Thanks for the question. Where does North sleep when you have a tent and trailer? North when we're camping, my dog North just sleeps outside. So even when we have the trailer or whatever, he just, I don't know, he sleeps like underneath the trailer or whatever. Would I ever go alone again? Yeah, like North, he doesn't like getting in the he doesn't like getting into the tent. Like even when we have a tent on the ground, we let him in, he just like starts panicking and tries to like bust his way out because it's just too claustrophobic in there. So anyways, he doesn't sleep outside at home, but he was raised as a puppy sleeping outside like a lot of huskies do, so he just definitely likes that. But like sometimes when we're winter camping in the hot tent, it'll be too hot in there and he'd rather go outside, but he has the option to come in if he wants. Would I ever go alone again? I'll go on the show alone again, you mean? Amber Dawkins. Would I ever go? Oh, yeah, I can see that. I can read, apparently. Would I ever go on the show alone again? Yeah, why not? Could use another refill on the old bank account. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Hey, Tori, are you like helping make questions go to the top here? Yeah. You are? Okay. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. Are you and Joey getting together anytime soon? I'm guessing you're talking about Joey Robinette, Joe Robinette. We talked about potentially doing a whitewater canoe trip, potentially starting from my property here. Joe's getting into whitewater. He called me when me and Ted had just finished our Manitoba trip. I was like, dude, let's get into some whitewater. Let's make it work this summer. So maybe next summer we're gonna get together and do some whitewater paddling. Here's what Huddy threw the last GoPro into the lake. Did you purchase a new? Well, no, I didn't, because I just bought 2 brand new GoPro Hero 10s. Because usually I shoot with 2 GoPros, and Huddy threw one of those into the lake, which unfortunately had all the footage. So if you're watching our French River trip, you know, it's like a lot of that footage we had, there was 2 shots and now there's only 1. But I just couldn't spring for a new one. So I ended up, now I use a GoPro Hero 10 and my old GoPro Hero 8. So I haven't sprung for a new GoPro Hero 10, but man, those things are good. The sound, the picture quality is so much better. Hello, Jim. What about a new winter expedition? Lars, good to see you. I don't know if anybody knows Lars Anderson, but you should check him out. He does a lot of serious, winter bushcraft stuff. He was on a loan in Norway, in the Norway version. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to do a Northern Ontario snowshoe crossing to cross the Temagami region on foot this February. So it's going to be a remote trip. It's not like a hardcore Arctic expedition. So there will be trees there, and we're mostly going to be essentially following lakes. There's tons of lakes there and rivers, and it's going to be about 100 miles long. And we're going to be hauling toboggans and more or less following old canoe routes, the old Nastogon. Nastogon means roots, essentially, and those are the old canoe routes that have been there for thousands of years.
It might be lagging a lot.
Oh, really? Am I lagging a lot, everybody? Do you feel lagging?
It's lagging for me.
Tori says it's lagging for what? Here's one. What was the gold nugget weight? Oh, geez, I forget the weight, but it was worth worth about $450 US. So I don't know, a lot. So like a lot. That was awesome. I should have that whole area where I found the nugget is protected, fortunately. But yeah, it just goes like some people are like, oh, you found this gold nugget. Why didn't you stay there? Let me tell you something. $450. Those float plane charters cost like thousands of dollars. Like, it just goes to show. And I panned gold for over 20 hours. I didn't show all that, right? And I wasn't very good. I'd never really done this before. So I'm sure some people would have done a better job. Oh, my power's flickering. We got a blizzard going on outside here. But yeah, at that point, I was just desperately trying to find something so I could show everybody, hey, look, I found something. So I feel like I just got super lucky. I happened to be on a spot that was right off the bedrock, which I didn't really even understand how important that was at the time. But I think that's why, because I was panning right on bedrock. And then I just basically maybe panned once or twice more the rest of the trip, because I just didn't feel like I had to get out. I had to make time, right? But, I feel like you're spending the money to get in such remote areas, trying to pan for gold and even pay your expenses can be pretty challenging unless you really know what you're doing. But it was a cool experience, and one that's definitely in line with like the Yukon and the history of the Yukon and the culture there. So that's neat. Where do you get the detailed maps for your river trip? So the maps I use are the part of the Canadian topographic system. So it's called Topo Canada. So you can, there's any number of places that are authorized to print them and sell them. World of Maps in Ottawa, Map Town in Calgary are a couple places off the top of my head, and you can select the maps you want, either 1 to 250,000 or 1 to 50,000. You can select the maps you want off of the Canadian Topographic Index. It's basically a grid. The other place you can go, there's a couple sources online you can print them off. So what I've been doing is I got a better printer, and this is cheaper. So I print them off online. I go to, I think it's mytopo.com, and it's a little challenging to navigate, but you can find them. You can print them off piece by piece, and then paint them with Thompson's water seal, something, give them a little waterproofing, print them on no tear paper, whatever. And then what I do is I'll go to a website, because when you print the maps off, you don't get all the map datum on it. One of the things that's important is what the declination is, right? So what's the difference between true north and magnetic north? So you can actually go online and type in Canadian declination calculator. And then you can go to, your Garmin mapping software. Google Earth is okay. It's not as accurate, but probably good enough for this. And then you type in the long lat, or even Google Maps, whatever. You type the long lat into the Canadian government declination calculator, and that'll give you up-to-date declinations for that exact area. So you don't need to calculate the movement of the magnetic North Pole, which you have to do when you buy paper topographic maps that have that map datum on them. And then I just write it right on the thing. So that's what I've been doing now. Hope that helps. Here we go. Canoeing Center, New York. Where do you gather information for planning remote wilderness canoe trips, especially routes that are seldom traveled? You know what? I just yeah, there's always the concern that, you see a river on a map, and then you get out there and it turns out, it's unnavigable, or it's too dry, or this is only a good spring run. So there's certain things that I've used that, I can look at a map and calculate the drop of the river. So I can calculate it by, how many contour lines cross that river. On a Canadian topographic map, the military grid lines, the squares on the map from one side to the other equals 1 kilometer from tip from corner to corner. I think it's 1.4. So, getting close to 1.5 almost. But you can, you can divide the each contour lines, the contour interval will tell you what each contour line represents, how much elevation that represents. And by counting the number of contour lines crossing the river, and then dividing the number that they represent with the number of kilometers in that stretch of river, you can get a good idea for the drop. So that's one good way. My CCR is a good way to my Canadian canoe routes, which is a great website with all kinds of trip reports and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, it's just from looking at topographic maps, and oftentimes I'll head out without having a bunch of river notes telling me where the portages are and stuff like that. I'll find out that yes, it's possible to travel. Somebody has traveled, or someone did travel it. And that just helps that. Well, and did they live? Yes. Okay. Well, let's go and do it. But I'm not always looking to some of these maps that these rivers that I travel, like in the Yukon, they are rivers that people do, right, that guided companies sometimes run trips down, or at least try to see if they can fill trips on that, or where there are existing trip reports and stuff like that you can find online. So my CCR is a great place to start. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jim. What's the learning curve for drone photography? I don't know. To be honest with you, when I'm flying my drone, I'm like terrified that I'm going to crash it all the time. I'm like getting a little bit better at it. But just learning how the thing works. The newer ones have all these cinematic settings and stuff like that. Learning how it works helps a lot. But yeah, I don't know. The other thing I noticed is if you can get kind of two motions at once, so instead of just going forwards, if you can be going forwards and turning a little like this a little, you can get more of an engaging cinematic shot. But I'd say I don't think too long, really. You just get out there, you put the thing up in the air, you hit record. You try not to get too worried, because it's like kind of traumatizing if the wind picks up and you think you're going to lose the thing and all your footage and all that. It can be devastating, right? So but yeah, I'd say the longer the faster you use it, the more quickly you get more usable shots within that period of flying a drone, if that helps. But I'd say by the time you've flown the thing 4 or 5 times, you're getting the feel for it, and you'll have some usable footage. Maybe not if you're shooting for National Geographic, but hope that helps. Question. Hey, Jim, do you find that all the filming sometimes interferes with your passion for the wilderness and your quiet time in the woods? Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the answer is yes. Now I'm so focused on filming all the time that sometimes I'm not as in tune with my surroundings. I remember before I used to film stuff, I'd be able to always sense before we would see an animal. I just sense it, like something was there, and I'd call it out, and sure enough, we'd see some deer, we'd see something. Now I'm so focusing on the filming that doesn't happen to me as much anymore. However, how much time would I really get to spend in the wilderness if I didn't do this? I mean, you can't make money transporting furs anymore. Like I'm sure the voyageurs said that carrying 400 pounds on their back was ruining their quiet time in the bush too, right? So if you're going to try to make a living out of doing stuff like this, there's got to be some sort of caveat. And I really enjoyed the filmmaking aspect of it too. And oftentimes the time when you least want to pull out your camera and get a shot is when you do it afterwards. It's sort of like the best footage, and you never really regret doing it. So you can kind of answer that question both ways, I guess, if that helps. What would be a good general use canoe river canoeing? No rapids, just some fast water in spots. I don't know. I'm always doing whitewater. Maybe the lower part of the Big East near Huntsville would be easier for that. Maybe every river is probably going to have some rapids and falls, which mean portages if you don't want to run them. So remember, you can always find something and portage it.
I think he means what kind of canoe.
Oh, do you mean what kind of canoe? Tori's just like, he means what? Sorry. Yeah. So what kind of a canoe for river tripping? I mean, something with a little bit of rocker is good. Like a prospector has a minimum amount of rocker. So if you're not really doing rapids, but you might need to maneuver a little more in the river because there's currents and swifts, it wouldn't hurt. Plus it has a large volume. It doesn't feel as tippy. So you can plan longer trips and load more stuff. And then for river tripping too, if you're going to be doing swifts and stuff like that, a durable material isn't a bad idea. They have what is it? I think Swift has Expedition Kevlar. Probably a better choice would be Novacraft Tough Stuff. Not the Tough Stuff Expedition, just Tough Stuff, which is super durable but light. That's probably your best bet, really, I would say, is a 17. If you're going to go tandem, 17-foot prospector and Tough Stuff for river tripping with only doing swifts. I mean, that's going to be hard to beat. And then you also have a canoe that you can test in some class 1s and 2s as well. So that's what I would recommend for sure for that. Any collaboration with, say, YouTubers like Lost Lakes, Xander could tag along. I've met Xander and his brother, and I thought they were great. Like just attitude wise, you know what I mean. Like they're not lazy dudes. You know what I mean. They're hard workers. They're smart, you know what I mean? They're humble, funny. So yeah, I who knows? Maybe there's already something in the works there. I don't know. You're gonna have to wait and find out. But I hung out with them at a big rendezvous I did with a bunch of other outdoor influencers. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Favorite canoe trip meal? I like pancakes are hard to beat out there. Pancakes with homemade maple syrup or just real maple syrup. But man, I gotta say, fresh brook trout or speckled trout. Okay, and not just any fresh speckled trout. The first one of the year of the trip. So every year, most years I head out and I do a spring trout fishing trip, and always the first one. So my first trout of the year in the spring is my favorite camping meal, I would say. That's hard to beat. I don't know if that's hard to pack, so it's maybe not the best answer, but that's my favorite. Wayne Richards, would you consider going on an overseas adventure? I don't know. I don't really sail, so I don't really know about just paddling over the seas. Just kidding. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Why not? I mean, I have so much of the Canadian North and Alaska to explore, and there's such a vast wilderness here, right? So I love really getting into those really remote areas. So to fly way further to get to somewhere that's not, as remote is a bit of a turnoff, or like not a turnoff, but but at the same time, whatever, man. Like I've always like my background, James Baird. That's a very Scottish name. It'd be pretty cool to go to the Scottish Highlands. You know what I mean? Even some other places. I've always thought some of those Silk Road countries were cool. Mongolia, Siberia. These kind of remote places are the places that kind of call to me. A lot of Finland and Sweden and stuff looks quite a bit like it does around here, but it would be neat to check that out too. So absolutely not out of consideration. Uh, hey Pat, here we go. Any trips planned for your brother Ted coming up? With my brother Ted. Mm, Nothing as of yet. He can be kind of a hard dude to pin down sometimes, but I'm sure we'll do one together at some point. Maybe it might not be a big one, but it might be. I don't know. So nothing as of just yet, but hoping we get some more trips together too. Have you ever paddled the Spanish River? Great question. No, I haven't. Was supposed to do it last year. Was considering doing the year before. So maybe this year will be my year where I do it. Have you ever? Do you have a favorite portage you have ever done? If so, why? Wait. Do you have a favorite portage? Favorite? Who the hell likes a port? My favorite portage is the same portage as the shortest portage I've ever done. Well, you know what? That's not entirely true, because if you count the walk back, I think it's Bill Mason that said that. He said, whoever likes portaging is crazy, but I like the walk back. And I'm going to probably, maybe because it's the freshest in my mind, but I'm going to say, man, I think it was the first big canyon, or this both between one of those two big canyons. I portaged on the Bonnet Plume. Wow, that was this past summer. Like, I'm talking about like gorgeous cliffs down to the water, canyons, mountains, and then the kind of this mixed cloud and rain with the sun would peek through, and there'd be rainbows, and there'd be that golden, beautiful light illuminating the rain, and just gorgeous mountains all around. So I would say some of those portages on the Bonnet Plume. I got to take a quick recess here, everybody. Just sit tight, and we'll be back with you. honey. Oh, he threw your Christmas present down the stairs. Did you see it? No. Okay. Is anybody still here? Sorry about that. Yeah, it was crushing issue. Anyways, we'll get back into the questions. Thanks everybody for sticking around here. I don't know about anybody else, but we're getting a pretty big snowfall, some wind whipping outside. A stormy Christmas night, it feels like. Do you do much hunting? Think I've only seen the one moose mention of being harvested in one of your only older Yukon videos. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not really a big hunter. I don't do it much on my channel, but I've gone deer hunting for years. I used to hunt turkeys. I haven't in the past few years. I hunted in the Yukon a few years back. I actually did a bison hunt with a friend of mine. I drew a buddy hunting tag, and I did a moose hunt in Newfoundland this year as well. So yeah, like I hunt for meat. And I like to fill the freezer and eat meat. I enjoy, the chase and the challenge and the actual hunt. I don't enjoy killing things, but I'm also not a vegetarian, so there's Tori, and so I'm eating my family healthy meat as well that I procured myself. So yeah, I do all outdoor activities for sure. Okay, here we go. Say hi to Tori. You and Tori are inspiring together. Was she as outdoorsy before you all were together, or did your interest in being outdoorsy rub off on her? Tori, yeah. Why don't you answer that, honey? Love the videos. The first Yukon series is my favorite. My 11-year-old son wants to know why all the tanks you and Ted catch are actually dinks, I think you need to say. That's funny. Yeah, well, Tori set that one up. I think that they're bigger. They're bigger than you must just be getting a bad camera angle. That's my answer to that. And so, yeah, I think definitely I rubbed off on Tori a little. Now, Tori, very adventurous. Her friends are like, I'm not surprised that Tori's doing this kind of stuff right now. She's always very athletic as well. And she grew up in what once was a smaller town, which is Newmarket, but now is like, kind of become, bedtime community for Toronto, basically. But yeah, so she grew up, a little bit more rural, right? They had like bush parties, and then she grew up, biking and rollerblading and stuff like that. And so she thought she was outdoorsy. She thought she liked to go, rollerblading in the valley, and she was outdoorsy. And then one of the first trips I took her on was like a spring melt trip on a river called the Scutamata, which is like a Highway 7 run, Southern Ontario. And like I didn't fill her in on anything. There was still like ice shelves and snow on the ground and everything. We were just like these crazy rapids, and I didn't even like teach her how to draw or anything. And sure enough, we ended up screwing up and spinning around above like a waterfall that we were going to run. We got to run on the left. Well, managed to spin back around, but we hit it on the wrong side, and we went straight into a boulder. Dented a huge hole in the front of my Royal Canoe. It actually pierced a hole, and it was like a baseball was like pressed into it. Both of us flew out of the canoe. I didn't have a dry suit on. Tori was laughing. I was like sitting there floating. Tori had the dry suit, floating with like ice chunks, and I managed to pull my canoe up, and then I stayed warm because I chopped a bunch of wood, and it was getting late, so we ended up making camp. And then it rained, ice rain, freezing rain all night. I slept soundly. Tori was scared that I was going to die. She didn't think anybody could possibly survive what I'd just been through. I was having fun. And then the next day she decided that she didn't want to continue the trip and flagged down a vehicle at the next bridge in, a semi panic. And she came back. So, sometimes you say ease into him. Sometimes you go full blown into it. And, she ever trusted me the same since then? Maybe not. But, at the same time, she kind of loved it and she wanted to go out doing more and more. And now she does her own trips with her friends and solar trips and all kinds of stuff like that. And now she runs Paddle Like a Girl, which is anybody want to check out paddlelikeagirl.com. Tori runs courses geared towards women. They're just beginner courses teaching women how to backcountry camp and paddle and navigate and gear. All you need to know. She runs them right off our property here on the Magnetawan River. And so people camp out right on our property. They paddle around here, and she just looks to empower women to be able to run and get out there and do their own trips and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely become her own thing. But I'd say, yeah, I got her into it for sure to an extent, maybe in over her head at first, and myself too. Okay, what do we got here? Do we have another question? Favorite lake in Temagami? I guess I haven't done like a ton of Temagami adventures, but so yeah, there's so many nice lakes. I don't know, maybe Wakimaka. That's pretty cool. Obabaka, like the north end of Obabaka is epic. Bob, Sheesh Kong or whatever, small but epic with the Spirit Rock and that very special place in there. It's probably got to be one of them. I don't know. There's so many, so many. Wolf Lake is incredible. Even Sylvester, Chinaguchi, man, tough to narrow it down. But yeah, one of those. Thanks for asking. Any tips for a young guy wanting to get into portaging, exploring like yourself? I'm an avid camper, but would like to take it to the next level. From Southern Ontario, so any trips would be great. Thank you. Good question. Any tips would be great. Yeah, I think a big part of it is just doing your research and finding out ways to gain information, right? One of the best ways to do it is just, you can get online and you can look at topographic maps online and like just pan them and find routes, look up potential routes on places like MyCCR. A lot of the trips I started with were routes just laid out in Kevin Callan's books. So that's a good way to start. If you want to look up Kevin Callan, he's got all kinds of books with different canoe routes that would be not too far from where you are in Southern Ontario. So yeah, check that out. Read through them, pick which one you like. Get some better maps and use Callan's notes from the book and go off and do it. And that's probably all you need. It tells you where the that right there, Kevin Callan's books for you getting started off, that's all the info you really need to know. I would say you're going to need to get some better maps than just the ones in his books, but I'd say try out Algonquin. Don't go crazy just yet necessarily. Try out Algonquin, and then you can look at Killarney. Then you can kind of look at Temagami, and then branch out from there. But yeah, hope that helps. Any chance you have any footage of you and Ted on the Beaufort Sea? No footage. I have some pretty epic pictures when we climbed this cliff. But yeah, just photos. We end up, we had like some little DVD burning camcorder that was supposed to be like the state of the art. So this is like 2008, right? And it just ended up sucking and all the discs got corrupted. So we managed to get some of them fit, like data recovered some footage. So we do have some shots of like muskox and like a wolf howling at us, and a couple like whitewater shots where we set up the camera on shore and stuff like that. But we didn't bust it out of the Beaufort Sea, only photos, and still not even very many of them. So I don't even know if GoPros were even a thing back then. So yeah, unfortunately, no video footage of that. Maybe we should go back. Who's the maker of that pot? Seems reliable. Geez, I haven't smoked the stuff in years. So I don't know who makes it now. Maybe the dispensaries. It's legal. Just kidding. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the pot I have, I don't even remember, but I think it's an old Mech brand pot that's not made anymore. Now you're getting all these like annoying like cooking things that are just like rubber, like that are like heat that are pots without a bail, without a handle on the top. They like, why would you get a camping pot without an arm so you can hang it over the fire and pick it on and off the fire, right? Like, and the good thing about the pot I have is the lid fits on tightly, so it's kind of a pain to take it off. You'll see me and Ted like banging the lid there, take it off. However, it means that it stays in there, so even if it falls off, you don't necessarily lose everything. If it tips, you don't lose anything. And also, if you're boiling water to drink, it doesn't get that ashy flavor in there. But I think like now, I don't think you can get those anymore. I think GSI was making something similar for a while, but without a bail arm. And then most of the other ones you can get the one me and Ted had on a loan. I couldn't find, or ours was too big. It didn't fit the specifications. So we had to spend a fortune on this titanium one, which was pretty good. Although again, the lid didn't fit tightly. So yeah. You know, a good bet might be a Zebra Billy. They're pretty cool. Probably be the best thing available now. So yeah, check out Zebra Billies. Who is your guy for knowledge of all these endeavors you undertake? Who's your guy for knowledge? I don't know. I think it's just books, man. Like, I guess I think, for example, I learned a lot from Expedition Canoeing from Cliff Jacobson. It's a book that I just studied. It's not really a book you read. I never really read a ton of like, adventure stories or necessarily full stories of adventures or explorers or stuff like that. I've read some of those, but when I was getting into this stuff, when I was learning it, I got books and I studied them, and they're more like kind of like a textbook. So that's what Expedition Canoeing was like. I think now it's called Canoeing Wild Rivers by Cliff Jacobson. And, I read it at least 2 times very intensely, maybe 3, and didn't read it, studied it, reread parts multiple times, made notes, and then I would go back and reference it. So, you could say, yeah, those books, I think, were my thing, but I don't really have like a mentor. Like, I'm mostly all self-taught, right? Like, I learned a lot of this stuff. My dad and my grandfather, they built a water access camp back in the 60s. It was off grid for years. We didn't have we were on CB. We didn't have a phone till I was, I don't know, probably in my late teens or whatever. And maybe not, yeah, somewhere around there. And so that's sort of where we grew up, and where I learned to paddle and portage and about the bush and about boats and fishing and the outdoors and all that. But so that was just like my dad and my mom and my family that I learned that from. But it wasn't these big expeditions. To learn how to do them was, another whole kind of thing I had to learn. I just taught myself. I think I did take one course on compass navigation, but I missed the final day where we were actually in the field doing it because I was like hungover. It was like Saturday morning, and I was like 20. Like, I'm not going to be there, So yeah, but I still studied that. I studied how to use topographic maps, how to read them, how to look up longitude, latitude, all this kind of stuff. Just through studying books is how I learned everything. Completely self-taught, I guess, in that aspect. What do I use for a GPS system? Yeah, I've been using the Garmin 66i recently because it's an inReach and a sat texting device all in one. So you get one thing. I just keep it tethered. It's completely waterproof. So I keep it tethered to my belt with a lanyard and in my pocket. So I have it on me all the time. The only thing about that, though, is if you're running, and some people say sometimes it's good to have 2 GPSs. Like, if there's 2 people, why not both bring one, right? But the only thing with that is if you want to save your batteries for, an SOS on your inReach or for text messaging, and you're running your GPS all day, you're running down your batteries using your GPS. So, so it's a little bit of a drawback, but I still use that. But I'm not typically running my GPS all day. Like I'll turn it on and almost sometimes use it as a compass. If I'm on a huge lake, pick a bearing, turn it off and go to that. And then you can use it for long periods of time if you need to, but you just got to be a little more careful about battery life. That's why I like to, I like to bring make sure I bring like an anchor battery and a charging cable and keep it accessible so I can charge it whenever I want. How do you select your music? Al Saver Lake is amazing. Now we listen to him all the time. I don't know what it is, but my wife says this to me. Whenever there's a song I like, I might not even know what the song is about, what the lyrics say. But then when I break down the lyrics, I find out that it's something about nature and it's something about wilderness, or something cool, like something right in line with like my passions, like, about indigenous people or like, some sort of like explorers or whatever you might want to call it. Right. And so that El Saver Lake stuff just spoke to me. I was just surfing music on Soundstripe, which is one of the music libraries that, I'm on, and so there I'm just kind of clicking on tunes, listen to some of his tunes. I'm like, man, this embodies what I'm doing, like paddling on this lake. Like this is, sure enough, I click on him after using it a couple times. I click on his album and I see the front cover of his album is a canoe paddling on a lake. Isn't that incredible? They can talk, like the music talks. Amazing. I guess it's art, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the amazing about it, right? But it's like that music, he wrote it about, being in these, like El Saver Lake is a lake in Algonquin Park. So he wrote it about being in these beautiful places, very similar to these beautiful places I was in. And I listened to it and I put myself in the same place he was when he was inspired to write that song. So yeah, isn't that crazy? I'm glad you asked that. Canoecopia in Madison, Wisconsin this spring. Oh yeah. Actually, me and Tori were going to speak there, but we ended up having a big thing come up, which is a bummer because last year there was the year before there's COVID, then last year there was COVID again, and then so some people went, and then this year we're gonna go. Both me and Tori we're gonna go. We're all hyped up to go, but then it looks like we're gonna be just like super busy with this other big thing that we have going on. That's like I can't wait to share more about. But yeah, I have another kind of big thing that is going to be pretty cool on the content TV kind of side. So I can't wait to share that with everybody. But the next time we're going to be out there shooting is going to be during Canoecopia. So we were in and then we had to bail. Bummer, right? I love doing Canoecopia. I love presenting there and meeting people and going out and checking out the town of Madison and hanging out with different people from the industry. So it's a bummer. This will be the third year in a row I missed it. So if we can't make it this year, but I'm going to make sure that the following year we can make it and come back with like all this epic presentation material from the last couple of years. So it's going to be extra special when I do make it back. Have you guys done the Trans Taiga? No, I haven't done the Trans Taiga. Actually, I've looked at maps of it, and I saw another guy, Justin Barber, went up there as part of a canoe trip to go get a canoe back that he left stashed in the bush, and it made me want to check it out and get up there. So yeah, it's definitely on the list just to to drive that road. Like could be just an overlanding adventure with the family, just to get up there into a remote part of northern Quebec, and then who knows, maybe jump a couple lakes back into the bush and camp out a bit and come back and have like a sort of a take our time getting there on an overlanding adventure. But no, I've never driven it. One of the other remote roads I've driven in Canada, other than up to Leaf Rapids in northern Manitoba. That was pretty cool. But the other one was up to Black Lake in northern Saskatchewan, from Points North up to Black Lake. The road gets pretty interesting. And everyone's telling me, oh, the road's way better now. And I'm like, lost my muffler twice. The first time I managed to use haywire to like wire it back on. And then the second time I just heard it rip off, and I just looked in my rearview mirror and just kept driving. So yeah, but yeah, Trans-Taiga would be cool to travel. Have you ever read poems by Robert Service? I think you'd enjoy The Cremation of Sam McGee. I mean, yeah, for sure. I think Cremation of Sam McGee is one that probably most people in Canada are read in school or learn in school. It's such Canadiana, but also if you check out the intro to my last Yukon series, I call it Spell of the Yukon. And Spell of the Yukon, the Spell of the Yukon is actually the name of my favorite Robert Service poem. And if you look at the sizzle and also the intro to episode 1, I actually recite my favorite Robert Service poem passage in that poem. So that's why it says, I forget what it says. It says there's valleys unpeopled and still. It says a bunch of stuff, and it goes, there are valleys unpeopled and still. Speaking of the Yukon, there's a land and it beckons and beckons, and I want to go back, and I will. And I thought that was perfect because this was my second big solo adventure in the Yukon. So that poem, thinking I want to go back, I will, and the Yukon beckons, was the perfect thing to use for my follow-up series, which I called The Spell of the Yukon, after Robert Service's poem, which is in the Canadian domain. So as a Canadian, I'm allowed to steal his topic without his title, without paying royalties. So, but thanks for asking that. Favorite canoe book? Well, I mean, I guess like I was talking already about Cliff Jacobson's Canoeing Wild Rivers. But I mean, like, there's some other cool ones here. Here's the Canoe Atlas of the Little North. That is just a mind-blowingly impressive resource that these people put together after canoeing this whole area of the from kind of basically the North Shore, Lake Superior, from Lake Winnipeg to James Bay and Hudson's Bay. That's what the Voyageurs called the Little North. So that area, incredibly well detailed. If anybody that's looking to do trips up in that area, that's an absolute must buy. Here, so I got my laptop piled up on a bunch of canoeing books. This is also a really cool one. This is by John Jennings. His daughter and her husband are friends of mine that actually live in Whitehorse permanently. And he was one of the guys, the founders of the Canadian Canoe Museum. But there's all just kinds of documentation here on canoes, of the first people and all kinds of stuff like that. The birch bark canoes, but also some really well written, resonating reading materials, part of it too. And then also we talked about we spoke about how do I get into this? How do I learn? Well, I mentioned Cliff Jacobson, Canoeing Wild Rivers. But I didn't mention this puppy right here. So this is called Path of the Paddle by Bill Mason. And so Canoeing Wild Rivers, or Expedition Canoeing as it was formerly called, that's going to teach you how to plan these remote canoe trips. That's all about planning, what gear you need, the best way to pack your gear, how to everything, a lot of navigation, specific stuff about GPS, all kinds of stuff like that, how to use a compass is even, but to have the actual skills of paddling. So me even more, potentially even more, I use the book Paddle Your Own Canoe, which my parents got me years before I even really got into canoeing. And when I got into it, there it was. And that's why they say a book is the best learner, because it's a book is the best teacher, because it's always ready to teach when you're ready to learn. It doesn't push you to learn something. So whenever you pick it up, it's because you want to and you're ready to take that in. So I think that's important, and that may be the only reason it worked for me, but it also was because I'm passionate about it. But this book, it will teach you how to paddle a loaded whitewater canoe. So this might not be the best instructions for somebody that's into canoeing, bombing off waterfalls and little tiny whitewater boats and stuff like that. That looks like Big Thompson on the Petawawa River, or Little Thompson. Yeah, Little Thompson, that would be. That's a great whitewater river. So that's a great one too, for sure. Path of the Paddle, must buy. In fact, if you get Your Own Canoe by Joni and Gary McGuffin, Path of the Paddle by Bill Mason, and Paddle Your Own Canoe by Cliff Jacobson, and you read those books and research them. So Path of the Paddle has little pictures of how to do everything, how to eddy out step by step. So there'd be a sequence of photos, click, 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 click. And I don't know why, but I honestly find it better than watching YouTube videos a lot of the time. Both are good resources too, but because I can just sit there and visualize. So I used to just sit there and visualize these canoe maneuvers, and then I'd be a weekend warrior and I'd head out there and I'd practice them on the river that weekend, right? And so that's how I learned, by reading, visualizing, and then getting out there and doing, right? And then another thing I read a ton of was like survival books, bushcraft survival type stuff, like John Lofty Wiseman, SAS Survival was one that I studied. And so, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of kind of stuff like that, even in Cliff Jacobson's book about lighting fires, but all that kind of stuff, survival stuff, is important when it comes to, canoe expeditions, outdoor stuff, what to do if you get lost, what to do if shit hits the fan, basically. It's important to a bit of everything from, that's the name. Is the Caribou on your wall the one that I found on my trip? I actually found this one on the Mountain River. So yeah, I that'd be a mountain caribou. Just paddling the Mountain River in the Northwest Territories. That was washed up on a gravel bar with like some skin and stuff attached to it too, that we had to like cut off of the like raw hide. But I took it home and brought it to a taxidermist and got it fixed up. So yeah, I don't know if you watched that Northwest Territories adventure on my YouTube channel. You'll see where I found that exact caribou skull. You seem extra careful during your Yukon trip. How has having kids changed your willingness to take risks? Yeah, I think it has. I also had a pretty bad dump on the Hess River, and I didn't want that to happen again. But like, I also think that I really, on the Yukon trip, maybe there's a couple things I thought were going to be harder, and I ran them. I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad. But I also, unfortunately, just think on that trip, it was so technical, right? Like maybe there was some waves I missed that I could just bomb and have a good fun splashing and a big fun big water run. But for the most part, it was all like most of the standing waves were just like curling, irregular waves that everything needed to be avoided. And the current was just ripping fast and so pushy. It would never slow down. And I don't think there's one thing I portaged on that trip that was actually runnable. So, I might have just seemed more careful because I wasn't yahooing it up and dumping. But at the same time, it's deceiving. It's deceiving to see that from the footage, from the GoPro angles. And anybody that's tried filming their whitewater footage, they'll agree it always comes back and seems like way easier than it felt like when you're out there, right? So, but at the same time, yeah, absolutely, it's felt more. When I have the kids, I always got to think, I got to stay safe for them, and it's no wonder why your car insurance goes down after you have kids, because people know you're going to be safer. You're less likely to go out there and kill yourself when you have kids. So yeah, I think about them a lot, and honestly, selfishly, I think one of the things that gets overlooked is that we think about things. Oh, geez, I don't want my kids. If I'm going to die, I don't want my kids to grow up without a father, right? So you think about this. I also think about, I don't want to ever have to not have those wonderful moments with my family again, from a more selfish standpoint, right? So yeah, I think about that, and I think that it makes me a little more cautious out there for sure. Did you ever find out how much the gold nugget you found is worth? Yeah, that gold nugget, I was mentioning that before. So it's worth about $450 US, which is pretty sweet. Doesn't cover the float plane charter though. Man, you gotta, just to pay for your trip out there, you'd have to be at that for just months if you're lucky, if you even get it enough to pay for your float plane. But very cool experience. How many adventures have you been on but not uploaded? Well, yeah, so probably more adventures I've been on that before I started filming than what you see on my YouTube channel, right? Because I don't know how many years ago I started my YouTube channel, maybe 4 years ago now, maybe less. But yeah, so I'm 41 years old now. So I paddled the Nahanni. I did a self-guided trip on the Nahanni when I was like 22. Then I paddled the Moisey the next year. Then I paddled the upper and lower Stikine the next year. Then I paddled the Kujua the next year. And by that time, my credit card was really feeling the pain. Flashback, I don't regret spending it, but I was in a lot of debt from doing these big expeditions that I didn't even manage to pay off until I won a loan. So I don't know if I recommend doing that to everybody, but that worked out for me. Then I paddled the Puckasaw on the north shore of Lake Superior. What else? I think maybe the Kasagami is up on my YouTube channel. Yeah, so like a few other that I can't remember, but a few other expeditionary level adventures, and then plus like just tons of other ones, right? Like I'd paddle the Opiongo and the Upper Madawaska in a weekend, and then I'd go back and do it the next weekend, and then I go and I paddle the Madawaska, then I do the Petawawa, and I was just going and paddling rivers, all the time, right? Whatever chance I got in between these big expeditions too, and that's before I really ever filmed anything. And I thought maybe I could make it just writing articles and taking pictures for my articles, but then after I got my first article published and saw the paycheck, I realized that it was going to be a lot harder than just doing that. So, anyways. In Norway, we usually use wide skis for backcountry trips. In Canada, snowshoes rule. Have you used skis? Yeah, like I remember. I have a feeling that cross country skiing is impossible. Like it's just so hard. I'm not cut out for it, right? Like I'm okay when going like flat on a lake, but I remember my buddy Nate, who's like a pretty good cross country skier, and a lot of people do it in Canada, of course. But yeah, he took us on this one trip, and he's like, "Oh, I'm taking Jim Baird this adventure. I better show him this good route." And we're just on these undulating trails all through the woods and hills, and like my heels coming off the back as I'm going downhill. I'm just crashing, falling. Just fell like 2 times standing there doing nothing. Just zoop, boom. Ended up with a concussion, which is like the first concussion I've ever had in my life, which was then came back easier the next time. So like, it's not pretty. But yeah, it's something I actually got a decent pair of cross country skis. So I might start giving it more of a shot, because some trips it's faster than snowshoeing. I mean, just on the flats, like not necessarily crazy that much faster, but when you start having little downhills and stuff, like it's definitely faster. So there might be some trips in the future where it would make sense to try them out. So maybe I'll try to get into it a little more. You're a beast, mate. Sorry if this was asked already. Any thoughts on doing something similar to walk from Kikatarjuak to Pang? Really love that series. Rest in peace, Buck. That's my old dog, Buck, who came on that adventure with me. Yeah, I'm going to do a big winter expedition this year. It's not going to be in the Arctic on that scale, though. I probably will do another trip like that, but I'm also thinking, too, that it's going to be hard to get away. And I still love those adventures, but I really love my northern canoe adventures. For one reason, it's because of the fishing. It's easier to get fish on those summer canoe adventures. So unless I'm gonna, it's hard to do both a extreme expensive winter Arctic expedition and a summer one. So I might, not do them as regular. I'm sure I'll still do another one in the future. This year, I'm going to do one not in the Arctic, but one in a remote part of northern Ontario, where there's going to be some challenges like super deep snow, not that hard pack stuff you get in the Arctic, and about 100 miles of serious backcountry travel. Potential ice concerns on rivers, hauling around portage trails, used mainly nowadays by summer canoeists, hauling my stuff up steep hills through the bush and through chains of lakes and stuff like that. So I'm going to be out there for anywhere from 10 to 14 days this winter. So I'm going to be out there doing that trip in February. I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody. So I guess the answer is no and yes. I'm going to do a big winter expedition, but nothing the scale of crossing Baffin Island solo. What are some mental challenges when doing solo trips? I don't know, really. I just have you ever been to Puckasaw Park, Jim? Yeah, I've paddled the Puckasaw River and the Puckasaw Coast back to Hattie Cove. I started from the Paint Lake Road. Absolutely loved it. So I don't know what mental challenges I have. I guess just like, the actual challenges of being alone are more dangerous. Like you're more of a target to predators if you're by yourself. If you're lining your boat, you're doing it by yourself. So there's not an extra rope with another set of hands on it. It takes more time to set up, break down camp when you're by yourself, because you can't kind of divide and conquer. One guy gets the fire going, one guy gets the tent set up. You got to do that all by yourself. I guess the longest solo trek I did was 36 days. And there was some time on either end too, but I was in communities in the Arctic. So I don't know. I feel like, I just have a plan. I have a map. I have, if I do X amount of clicks per day, I'll be finished and enjoy myself along the way. Sometimes I miss just the camaraderie of just like telling jokes around the fire and stuff like that. So in some ways it's nice to enjoy. It can be a real handful sometimes. So sometimes I feel like I got to get back to like help her out before the kids drive her crazy. But yeah, I don't feel like there's painful thing about being alone out there that is really challenging. Maybe for people that don't like themselves, it might be harder. I don't know. But anyways, good question. What location do you most want to go back to? Oh geez, I don't know, man. That's a tough one there. It would be cool. Maybe the Kujua. I don't have any videos up on that, but that's I did that with my brother. We were up in the Arctic for 5 weeks. We were on the river for a month. We paddled on the Beaufort Sea and ran into some crazy troubles. But yeah, just there was mountains up there, and it was just such a, we were further north than the entire state of Alaska in the Arctic archipelago. And I'm not talking about Kuujjuaq in the Eastern Arctic. I'm talking about Kuujjuaq, which is just the Western Arctic Inuvialuit pronunciation of the same Inuktitut word, which means big river. And like we saw over 100 muskox, hand-fed an Arctic fox, wasn't even scared of us, got followed by a pack of wolves. We're just catching like lake trout every cast, tanks, freaking Arctic char, eating char and lake trout every day. Just like crazy, beautiful country. Saw over 100 caribou, just part of that too is just the culture, the different way of life. How, the North has changed even since I had been there, that life was hanging on by a thread, but like, I remember meeting David Kameyuk, who's probably passed on now, but he had 2 wooden legs because he lost them due to some weird flesh-eating disease when he lived in a born on the land, born in an igloo, had his wooden leg hacked off, had his regular foot hacked off with an ulu because this infection got into it, which had just killed a bunch of other people in his community on King William Island. Settled in Cambridge Bay, lived in a plywood shack, had a team of dogs. Each one of them, he just fed a caribou to. So he'd get a bunch of caribou, he just put one in front of each of his dogs, and then they were good for some period of time. And he just like these incredible people that have these incredible stories, and also people are so welcoming. And just hearing that stories and seeing that way of life. I mean, the North, these small communities have problems too. I'm not denying that, but a lot of really amazing people and amazing things. And just the North is just so enrapturing and addicting to me. The far North, even especially. So yeah, I forget what the question even was at this point, but my favorite place. So yeah, I probably, even though not as dramatically beautiful as the Yukon, I'd love to go back to the Bonnet, Plume, or Hess and all that. But yeah, I think that the high Arctic there, it was something really crazy. Maybe might not want to live there, but to visit is just insanely awesome. At least not out on the land in the Arctic. Who, in your opinion, makes the best winter sleeping bag? I go with Western Mountaineering, Bison Gore. It's minus 40 down sleeping bag. It's also super light, packs down small. If you tear the material in it, doesn't have as much loft. It doesn't say it's puffed up, but you can just easily fix it with a little goo or seams or whatever. So yeah, all day Bison, Western Mountaineering, minus 40, Bison Gore. Like, not getting much better than that in the world, I'd say. No more questions. Oh, here you go. What's your educational background? Did you study anything that's to do with your adventures? I'm going to get another beer. Hold on. Good question.
A lot of questions about how you learn how to canoe.
Yeah, I can. So yeah, actually something I always wanted to share with people, because a lot of people think I have some educational background, but in reality I don't. So like, I was not a good student. I was definitely not dumb. I was always the kid that, I always put up my hand and answer questions. Um, one of the, I didn't put my hand up when people said, "Hey, okay, whoever's done your homework, raise your hand." That's not at the time I would have raised my hand. I was always really like learning, but I guess I took what I needed to out of school. But and then the only thing I went to post secondary was a comedy college, which was a program in Toronto at Humber Comedy School. So I guess I have a bit of a background in performance arts, if you want to call it that. So I did actually some stand-up comedy gigs. If you can't tell, because I'm so hilarious. And so I did stuff like that, some sketch comedy. I actually got booted out of comedy school though. So I didn't graduate because you had to do all these other I get to do all these other freaking courses like math and English, and I guess I was failing those. I grew up with my family owned a map making business that eventually tanked. So I learned a lot about maps, and that my parents were into travel and all that kind of stuff. There's a famous I think his name was Pierre Baird, a famous missionary in I think 1611, who's also a map maker. I don't even know. I might be related to him. I don't know for sure. But so there's some sort of like uh, aspect of it there, that kind of side of education. I guess when it comes to the outdoors, I was always just super, because I grew up doing a lot of this kind of outdoorsy stuff. Had the confidence to take the next step. So essentially what I did was I just worked, and I learned as much as I could about all this stuff as possible. I just gained a real passion for it, and I'd work, and instead of going to my buddy's basement and smoking weed, which I did for a bit, which I realized nothing was materializing with what I wanted to do with my life. I went and I just studied and planned trips, learned about them, learned how to get better and better. And I just became like almost obsessed with like spending every waking minute of any spare time I had, like in the bush, you name it, building shelters, winter camping, trekking, going on canoe expeditions, spending like all my money on this kind of stuff, right? And all my spare time, like this insatiable want to sort of do this and somehow, also turn it into a career. And I actually, what was my big break was I was in New York City, and I cold called the editor in chief of Field and Stream magazine, and they didn't really run canoeing articles, but most of the other outdoor magazines had already dissed me. And Field and Stream kind of ran more stuff. There's mostly hunting and fishing, but they kind of do survival as well, and everyone was getting into survival at that point. And I ended up cold calling the editor in chief at Field and Stream magazine in 2 Park Avenue while I was there for a completely unrelated thing, and I ended up. Like going in the front door, and there's security. He said, "Do you have an appointment?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, I'm Jim Baird. I'm an expedition leader in the Arctic, and I need to talk to the field." I ended up calling up to the floor and giving the same spiel to the guy who was the gatekeeper for several other magazines on that floor, including Saltwater Sportsman and Outdoor Life. He came up. He said, "Okay, leave your story and your photos with me." I said, "Well, I really want to speak to the editor in chief." And he said, "Well, you can't talk to him." I said, "Well, blah, 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 blah." I'm Jim Baird, gave him my spiel. Next thing you know, I'm talking to the editor-in-chief's secretary. She says, "He can't talk to you. Give it to me." And I said, I gave her my spiel again. She said, "Okay, well, he's busy right now. If you wait, he'll see you." So I waited there for about an hour. Next thing you know, I was in the office with the editor-in-chief of Field and Stream magazine. I gave him my story, had these crazy details about my brother and I getting followed by a pack of wolves. It was getting caught in a storm on the Beaufort Sea. And then he sent me and my brother, then he sent me, hired me and sent me on these crazy assignments. So, I snowmobiled from, and that's where I got into filming too. I wanted to write articles, but he's like, "Well, we need this digital content, this digital survival expedition stuff." So I snowmobiled from the Mackenzie River across Great Bear Lake to Kugluktuk, continued across the Northwest Passage up onto Victoria Island, all the way to Ulukhakto on one trip. Finished further north in all of Alaska. I did a ATV trip on the Canoe Trail. They sent me on a 33-day canoe expedition across northern Quebec and Labrador via 4 rivers. I picked all these trips and pitched all of them, and myself. And then after about a year, they said, "Jim, this is the most money we've ever spent on anything. This is insane." And they dropped me. But, that gave me, I kept going at it. I kept doing stuff on my own, came back to them. They ended up buying I started working mineral exploration. And so I was able to, I was working with my buddy out of Sudbury, and we did, very environmentally conscious mineral exploration. So I'd be in the bush again for 3 weeks to a month at a time, sometimes in the winter, working diamond drilling project, working, beat matting exploration kind of stuff in northern Quebec, northern Ontario. And then I get out of the bush, and then I turn around and, I'd save a bunch of money, turn around and go on my other expeditions. And that gave me the money to do these big trips and work, and also just get a ton more bush time, and also gave me the money to pay an editor, edit my first, video series, which then I went back and sold to Field and Stream, the completed project. Before I was giving them raw footage, and there's so much footage, it's tough for them to hire an editor. And, they were new to that whole digital thing. So they said, this is very turnkey, Jim. Then they started just buying my finished edited stuff. I started selling stuff to other magazines. And then eventually jumped over into YouTube after I won Alone. So then Alone was my next big break. And so I ended up winning Alone, and it was a struggle, man. Like finally what happened is my mineral exploration, my family company stopped. Then my mineral exploration company the industry went to shit. And then I said, well, I got to get into this full time, like now or never. I was $35,000 in debt. I had no way how I was going to pay the bills at the end of that month. And I decided to go into being a professional adventurer full time, basically just supplying digital videos to magazines, which was a dying industry, more or less. Like the print magazines was dying, right? So it was a real struggle. But I managed to I get back from a big expedition, and when there'd be like a check in my mailbox, I'd pull into my driveway on fumes. There'd be a check I forgot was owed to me to save the end of the month kind of thing. So there's a lot of stories like that. And then I started finding out what some people were making off YouTube. So I started doing the editing myself, saving those editing bills, and kind of then became sort of a slave to having to edit a video every week or more. Just because YouTube wants you to upload at least once a week. But I managed to, once I got on a loan, I managed to use the money to, get married and start a family, which is something I always wanted to do. So that was my driving force out there. That's why I wanted the money, because I knew it would help jump me into that next level of my life. And then what I also did with that money from a loan is I bought this house. I also invested it in my own trips and kept my own content, because I could now take a risk that, if I didn't, if my videos never caught on YouTube and I made no ad revenue, that I could survive that. Right. So before, I had to sell my footage before I even went out and shot it, to get sponsors and stuff like that, but I couldn't really integrate them organically in footage I'm making for a magazine, because they would want to charge for that. So it made things more challenging, but at least I knew I was going to get money back. When I started doing YouTube, I had that little bit of a cushion with the money I learned from a loan. So I made from a loan. So I went and did, my crazy Hess River solo expedition. And then I did my Baffin Island expedition. I kept all the footage and uploaded it on my YouTube channel, which was a long, slower format. It wasn't so punchy. The other stuff that I paid an editor to do for the magazines, which include, Men's Journal, Field and Stream, Canoe and Kayak at the time. It was all more like kind of like a docu-series, almost like a public television docu-series. So this was more drawn out. I didn't know if people are going to like it. Sure enough, it took off, and I still write for Men's Journal, Field and Stream, Explore, Outdoor Canon, all that kind of stuff. But my business is, I'm just doing writing for them, and my video side is all completely switched over to YouTube, and that just kind of happened naturally. So I guess, like, as far as education, what would I have taken in school to get to where because somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? The job I have now never even existed back then. Right. So in school they're always telling people, oh, this is so important, education is so important, but the problem is that teachers are all telling kids that formal education is so important, and it is, depending on what you want to be, right? But really what's really important is just education. Education is extremely formal, extremely important. It just doesn't necessarily have to be formal education. So for all those kids out there that know they're super smart but just can't cut it in school, you might grow up to do something beyond your wildest imagination, which is what I'm doing right now with my life. And I'm not getting super rich off this, but the beauty part of it is people tell you, oh, it's not all about money, right? I didn't really know what that meant. I meant, like, what it means is, like, the stuff I get to do with my life now. You'd have to be a retired surgeon to do this, and then by that time you may be old enough that you don't want to be doing all this physical stuff anymore. You can't, or you would have to be a trust fund baby to have the time to do what I do. So I get to, even though maybe I'm not making millions of dollars, I get to do the kind of stuff that people who are making millions of dollars still can't do, even though they want to. And to me, that's what it means about, it's not all about money. I mean, there's more to it than that, but it's about kind of leading the life that you want to live. And I don't know if I'd gone to university and got a degree, and if my life had really worked out as it has for me. So I think, my own education, which was through working with these magazines, I learned so much how to film everything. Getting on a loan, they taught me a lot about filming. Along the way, I learned so much from brands, from marketing people at different brands. So I learned by doing, and I learned a ton through all these books that I studied. Right. I also read up on videography and stuff like that. So, very long answer, but it's something that I always wanted to share because people are always interested. So I hope you all didn't mind that long explanation there. Thanks. I'll get on to some more questions now. What's your dream? Money is no object. What's my dream? Money is no object. Geez. Well, basically, I want to, put in a garage here. I want to buy a remote property somewhere and build an off-grid camp on it that I can spend. Yeah. Oh, my dream trip, not my dream. Tori just said, so I have some dreams that I want to do, some big stuff that I want to do. But I guess my dream trip, money is no object. I don't know if I'm ever going to get the chance to do it, but I always thought that one would be pretty cool, would be paddling the Natla Keel. So from the Yukon-Mackenzie Divide on the Northwest Territory side, Keel River, Mackenzie River, up the Great Bear River, along the southern shore Great Bear, up the Wetzel, Tilchus, into the Copper Mine, then up the Fairy Lake River into the Hood River, and all the way to the Arctic Ocean would be my dream canoe expedition. It would have a bit of everything in there. So I think it would probably take 2 months though. Who slept where on your Newfoundland trip? I usually slept in the rooftop tent, and then Tori and the kids slept in the trailer. Sometimes we all slept in the trailer, which was like tough because there wasn't a lot of room. So mostly, and then Tori also decided to sleep up top. We had a really warm sleeping bag, so she gave it a couple shots. And sometimes it was better because the kids weren't like clambering on you or kicking you and stuff like that. And so sometimes we actually were getting better sleeps in the rooftop tent. But it was definitely cooler. So yeah, typically it was me up top and North slept outside, just, I don't know, under the trailer or whatever. Did you need to have a guide in order to fish during the Labrador trip? The brook trout fishing looked incredible. Yeah, we did. I don't know, the rules might have changed, But Labrador mean that you have to have a guide to fish in Labrador, except for right off the Trans-Labrador Highway as a non-resident. So even as a Canadian, you can't just go on a canoe trip and fish in Labrador. Arguably not really who the rules were meant for. They're trying to keep money for the lodges, but still, by law, you can't do that. So what we had to do is we had to get our Labrador guide licenses. So as a Canadian, we did that. So my brother and my buddy Will both are registered Labrador guides, and then we also had to use the services of an outfitter. So we use the services of Joe Gowdy Grand River Canoe Company, who guides canoe trips and also guides caribou hunting trips. So yeah, we had to go through leaps and bounds to be able to do that legally, but that's what we did. What was me and Ted's first big adventure as youths? Well, I guess the first one that we ever did by ourselves was we tried to do a canoe trip following the river that led out of the lake where our family's cottage was on, and we had like me, Ted, my cousin, and our two cousins. One of them was pretty young, and we got into it, and the water level was like way too low, and we brought a pretty heavy cargo canoe with us, and a 5-horse Honda motor, which we never got to use because the water level was so low, and there was no real portage trails around any of the rapids. So we had to like carry this motor, hopping from rock to rock through these shallow rapids, and like, you know, carry all the gear, hopping from rock to rock, and then kind of wind the canoe through and get back in. And tons of beaver dams. We're pulling over tons of beaver dams, and at one point there was this old broken log bridge crossing the river, and every time we disturbed a wasp nest under it, and every time we came back, we parked the canoe under it. Every time we came back to grab another bag, we get stung by wasps. And so, you know, it was just like, okay, here we go for the next load, get stung, out, go, come back, out, go. You know, it was just like we knew this was going to happen. And then like somehow we misjudged the map. We thought that we didn't have a proper topo map, so we kind of looked. There was only one river. We were going down to like the next bridge, right? How hard could that be? But we misjudged the distance, and our parents were nervous about us because we were just young, and was, you know, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, "Well, if we don't hear from you, we're calling in the search party." So we got all scared, you know. And then it was absolutely pissing rain out, and we got to this raging torrent that was going to be a huge portage. We had this huge canoe, and there was no trail around this thing. And so we decided that it was really impressive, and we decided that we just had to turn around and go back because we could have made it, but our parents were going to call in the search party. So going back at that point was probably harder, you know, but we really didn't know, because at this point we just were like, how much further are we? We weren't sure. So we had to go back up everything, up through the freaking hornet's nest, up the rapids. Also that night we brought in a jug of drinking water because most of this river just goes through swamp. So we brought some drinking water with us, and the entire drinking water thing blew up in our tent and soaked the tent. It was hammering rain, and my little cousin just started crying because it was so miserable. And then he started laughing, and then we all just burst into laughter hysterically because it was so miserable. So that was the first adventure that we ever did, a total disaster. My question, as an American, what is a hoser? So a hoser is actually a term that's just supposed to be a derogatory term for Canadians that was actually made up by Canadians, by Bob and Doug McKenzie, the McKenzie brothers, who was Rick Moranis and Dave, what the heck's his name? I forget his last name, but they were on SCTV. And they had a little spot on SCTV where they just come on, and they were like the lowest common denominator, right? They'd be like, "Oh, hey, how's it going, eh? Oh, where's my toque, eh? Oh," and just act like really dumb Canadians. Thank you very much. and they'd ask like really, they'd ask like these really dumb Canadians, like they'd just be constantly smoking like Demoriers and like drinking Molson Canadian and wearing earmuffs and like, it was called, they just said, "Welcome to the Great White North," and they just called each other hosers all the time. So that's basically where it came from. So I think a hoser is just supposed to be like a Canadian who's sort of the lowest common denominator. But it's funny because like a lot of the things, right? Like even like Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World, they were not supposed to be great, but in a way, even though they're making fun of themselves, they kind of like become cool in their own right. And like, it's almost like, in some extent, some Canadians kind of seem to take it as a compliment, maybe. So check it out. You can check out the McKenzie brothers on SCTV with Rick Moranis, and you can learn a little more about what a hoser is. Can you talk about the Circle Lake in Labrador? You said you wanted to go back. How was it formed, etc.? Yeah, so that's Lac Manicouagan. It's actually formed by a massive impact crater. It's actually on the Quebec side, so it's in northern Quebec in the Wapishka or Gruel Mountains. And there's a huge dam. If you saw that massive dam we drove through, that huge dam actually dams that lake, so it makes a more prominent circle like this. But it's a massive meteor impact site. So I don't know if it's like the meteor went in there and stuck there. I don't think so. I think the meteor probably disintegrated, and the island in the middle was sort of like the upwelling of the melted Earth's crust. Sort of like when you drop a drop of water in, water goes bloop and splashes up back again. So that's probably the melted Earth's mantle that splashed back up and then hardened and left that concentric wave, which is now the ring around. So that must have been one heck of an impact. But it's more prominent, like I said, because of the dam. So originally there was basically two lake-like sections like this. So there's a river that came and then it widened into two lakes. And then the outflow of those rivers joined together and went out like this. So, but they didn't actually connect at the top, and they're narrow. And you can actually Google Lake Manicouagan before the dam, and you can see a picture of that. But then when they flooded it, when they built that dam, those two lakes connected at the top and completed what's a perfect circle. So the look of it is not 100% natural, but the whole area is spectacular. It's actually a UNESCO biosphere reserve for all kinds of reasons, flora and fauna, all kinds of stuff. Very beautiful area. And the trip that I would like to do there, first of all, at Station Wapishka, which was actually a research station, but that's owned by Montagnais Innu people. So it's a native run initiative. It was actually a UNESCO research station. They've taken it over, and now it's basically an outpost, and they also offer some cultural experience, some canoe trips and stuff like that. Thank you very much. And there are hiking trails. You can do a 4-day backpacking trail there up Gruel Mountain, get like epic views, super remote area, but it's accessible because you still have the highway close enough to you. The trip me and Tori wanted to do, we wanted to do that backpacking trip, but we wanted to get a float plane to meet us at Station Wapishka. And then we wanted to fly in to the headwaters of the Mouchilagain River, which has amazing brook trout fishing, might even have Quebec red trout. And it's like a sweet whitewater river, beautiful mountains, comes back into Lake Manicouagan. Then we paddle Lake Manicouagan back to Station Wapishka, and then maybe, be a week, depending on how much time we have, and then do the backpacking trip. We're like, yeah, let's do it. And then we're like, what do we do with the kids? And we're like, So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, so that would be the Mouchilagain River out of Station Wapishka on Manicouagan. Ever use a cedar strip canoe? Are they strong enough for rapids? So there's two kinds of kind of what you call cedar strip, right? So you can technically a wood canvas. If you take the canvas off, it's cedar strips. But there's cedar strip, but there's ribs on the inside, right? Usually they're a little thicker cedar strips, and they're not necessarily put together so tightly. There's no like tongue and grooving going on or anything like that in between that. But a wood canvas canoe, yes, you can. So that's a cedar strip that has ribs in it with canvas on it. Yes, you can run rapids in that. You have to buy a repair kit. You don't want to hit any rocks. But it can take a wallop. You're probably just going to tear the canvas. A cedar strip, as in the kind of cedar strip that you see on people's docks in Muskoka, absolutely not. So those are cedar strips with the thin strips. There's no canvas on the outside, and there's no ribs. The reason there's no ribs is because they're way lighter. So they're like awesome to carry. If they're built well, they're fast, they're light, they look absolutely spectacular. But as soon as you hit one rock like this, because there's no ribs, the canoe just goes like this, and those cedar, and you're leaking immediately. So I've paddled one before. Me and Ted were shooting a pilot for a Weather Network series back in the day, and they had us dress up like Lois and Clark. But they I don't know, Lewis and Clark were wearing these like formal US, military ridiculous outfits, and we ran hog's trough on the Oxtongue River, pretending that it was like Shillelagh Falls. TV can get interesting, but this is just a pilot, so they're just trying to make something on with the budget they had. Anyways, anybody that knows this is a solid water. It's a class 4, like a class 4. So me and Ted came down the first part, and like the canoe just like broke and swamped, snapped around the boulder and splintered, and like wood chips flew up in the air and all this kind of stuff. And it's super dramatic. But of course, nobody caught the canoe smashing on the boulder on camera, unfortunately. But yes, I have paddled a wood canvas canoe. I wouldn't recommend it for any whitewater. Absolutely not. Any plans on writing, publishing a book? Sorry if it's been asked. Cheers. Hey Trent, hope you're good, man. Did you see my last video with anyways, the guy here is asking me this question, Trent. I bumped into him up in Labrador, and he's just like, we're messaging on Facebook. He's like, hey, Jim, I hear you coming up through Lab City, man. I'm like, he's like, hopefully we bump into you or something. I'm like, that'd be great. Like, that'd be so cool. Both of us are probably thinking, what are the odds, right? Sure enough, me and Tori are parked at the side of the road outside of Lab City. Where are we going to camp tonight? Oh, geez, what are we going to do? So sure enough, Trent and his wife Heather pull up, and, hey, Jim, Tori. We're like, hi. He's like, I'm Trent. I'm like, no kidding. Anyways, they end up giving us a bunch of moose and some salmon, and Charles' wife's from Makovic, so they have like they have access to awesome salmon and all this kind of stuff. So that's on the coast, and that's down their property, and it's super cool. Anyways, to answer you, so check out my last video, episode 4 of Eastbound Overland. It's the best one yet. So Trent, I'm thinking about writing a book. It's just that I'm so busy with everything else I'm doing. And I don't even know what to write on. I can write shorter articles. I've never structured like a whole book before, but I should give it a shot. It's just like everything else I'm doing is so challenging. And then I'm also concerned that like Canadian authors, you might not make that much off of it. So I'm worried if I spend a ton of time writing it and then nobody buys it, it might not it might set me back. You know what I mean? I'm not like at a point where I can just sit back and write books, and just that I'm like have enough in my bank that I can just do that. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, but at the same time, there's some pretty impressive Canadian authors. Atwood, Malcolm Gladwell, anyways, he's worth about $40 million. Jordan Peterson, a little controversial, but he's got some books. So I mean, it is possible, but I don't know how many Canadian outdoor authors are, how much they're really pulling in off that, but we'll see. I'd like to maybe when I get a bit older, so I can write a memoir or something like that. Anyways, I'll send you my first copy, man, when I do make one. So thanks for asking. How long do you see yourself continuing to be able to go on these extreme adventures, given the physical strenuous of them? 10 years, 20 years, any long-term plans? Yeah, I guess like I'm gonna have to dial it back, right? Like, but we'll see. Like, it really depends on what the if I can still do YouTube stuff. I don't know, like what will happen to YouTube. There's a bill C11's coming out. Canadian or YouTube sent me something saying that if Bill C11 passes, their algorithms are going to force them to point my videos at Canadians who might not be interested in them, which won't trigger the algorithms to suggest it anywhere, and basically told me it's going to make an enormous dent in my ad revenue. So I wonder if I'll even be able to do YouTube. And that's might be as early as the spring. So like that's completely out of my hands. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do at that point. But just in general, doing these expeditions, you know what? If I can stay in shape and stay healthy and stay injury free, I do have some injuries starting to add up. I used to play a lot of contact sports when I was younger. I think I'm paying for that a bit now, throwing baseballs on both my shoulders, my hip. I'm getting starting to feel these things a little more, and also just the wear and tear from what I'm doing. But for example, the Wind River in the Yukon, beautiful, beautiful river, and no portaging on it, no rapids, 2-week trip. You sit there and you steer. You know what I mean? People do it well into their 80s, and there's so many trips like that in Canada that maybe I just have to, maybe my followers will age with me, and that demographic of people will be able to look at the trips I'm doing, the scale of the trips I'm doing at that point, and be able to relate to that more, even though it's not as extreme, and inspire them relative to that size. So I do plan on doing something, but obviously I'm going to have to scale things back as I get old. Has there ever been a place you've camped or traveled through that you had your spidey senses tingling on hair or hair on the end for no reason? Strange things are done in the midnight sun. No, but yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. I don't really believe in ghosts and stuff like that, really. But I'm still open to that. It's a possibility. But Tori had an interesting experience when she was on a canoe trip. So Tori's my wife. She was doing a canoe trip with a friend of hers, and they had this really weird experience at this camp on this lake in Algonquin Park, in southern Algonquin Park. Tori, what was the name of that lake? She forgets the name. Yeah, so she had this really weird experience where like a bear was in the woods. They think it was a bear, and they like fired a bear banger at it, and it never got scared. And then like all this weird, like, and they're just spooked, and they just had this like weird feeling that they couldn't shake, or that they didn't like about the lake. And they're like, what's going on? Like tingly feeling, weird. And so she got home, and this was many days later, because they're on like a 5-day trip or more. And many days later, so it was still in her mind, and she told me about this lake that gave her this like spooky feeling. And so I started listening to your stories, and I said, well, let's look it up. Let's see if there's any like Algonquian legends about maybe bad medicine being in this area. Maybe there's something to it, right? Maybe you're not the first person to feel that. So I get on the internet, and I type in the name of the lake. I'm searching, and then all of a sudden something pops up on that lake. And who is it other than our friend Sean James from the channel My Self Reliance? And this is before he did this, and he wrote a blog about this for his website. This is before he got into any of his cabin building stuff that he's doing on YouTube now. And so we read a bit of his trip report, and he said this same lake, it's called Lawrence Lake. Tori just called down to me. It's called Lawrence Lake in Algonquin. And he said, we read it. He said that he looked back, and he had a deep foreboding feeling that he just couldn't shake from visiting that same lake. That's crazy. Like, that's too much of a coincidence. So maybe that's just something about it that subconsciously, spooky to us that we can't put our minds on, that a lot of people feel, who knows. Anyways, there you go. Has there ever been a place you've camped or traveled through that had your spidey sense? Oh, that's the same question. Oh, a lot of people here are making one. Oh, we're running out of time here, but we'll do one last question. Are you popping it up? Tori's fielding questions for me. Well, parenting upstairs.
I can put this one up. I think you might have already kind of answered it, but I don't know if we did.
Hi, Jim. Did you have formal training in canoeing and determining what kind of rapids you're facing? I never, I always thought I should take. So the question is, did you ever have formal training in rapids you're facing? I recommend taking like a whitewater course. You could take one from the Madawaska Canoe Center in the middle Madawaska. They're a little snobby, a little arrogant, but they teach things pretty well there, and a lot of people really enjoy their classes. I kind of thought about taking one there or somewhere, but it just never ended up happening. So I guess the answer is no. I never had formal training, but I talked a little bit about where to learn and the where I learned from multiple books, but the main one was called Paddle Your Own Canoe, and that's by Gary and Joni McGuffin, as well as Path of the Paddle by Bill Mason. And those books have step-by-step pictures of all the canoeing maneuvers, pictures of rapids with another great one was called The Complete Wilderness Paddler, which teaches through a story of a canoe trip on the Moisey, and that's by something Rugg or something, John Rugg or something like that. But the Complete Wilderness Paddle did a great job at trying to show how to eddy out, how to brace, and all these kinds of stuff. And I'd get these books and I'd visualize it, look at the picture. So they'd have somebody come in and, let's say, do an eddy out, for example, and they go click, 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 and they take a whole bunch of pictures and they put those in sequence, and they'd explain what was happening behind each step of the maneuver. And I'd visualize these and I'd go out and do them every weekend. And I'd visualize them and I'd do them. I'd study these books, studying them again and again, all these different maneuvers, sit there, close my eyes, visualize doing the maneuvers, and then I'd go out there and do them on the weekend. So that's how I learned. So, I never had formal training as in a person there, but I did essentially learn from the experts that wrote these books, and also did such a good job of articulating these skills and maneuvers through photos and descriptive writing. So in a way, no, but in a way, yes. Ted says he was a better hockey player. What was the truth? I don't know. I guess maybe he felt better because he played a lower level than me. Like he never really came up and played with the big boys in the levels I played. So, he's sort of like, maybe he's like the golf pro that thought he was good because he's just teaching a bunch of people that suck. But yeah, I would say that he was pretty freaking good. Ted's more of like a forward, he scored goals, but he wasn't the best passer. He's pretty good though. He had his head down. He's good, but I was a defenseman, so it's kind of hard to compare. But yeah, I don't know. He was pretty good though. So maybe he was better than me, but I think we were probably about the same. Well, looks like Ted should teach a limpet gathering course. Yeah, there's nothing much to it. The only tip for limpet gathering is go out at night. That's when they're moving and when you just pick them off quickly. Well, I think that is about bringing us to the end. I toughed it out. I'm actually feeling better because I got my mind off of being sick, which is going to kind of ruin my Christmas. Look at how nice that tree is. Oh, well. Super excited for Christmas. I think the kids have both been really good, so we can expect seeing Santa here. Here, I'll show you something else that somebody's asking about that was the moose that I got in Newfoundland this year. Anyways, we got the stockings hung by the chimney with care, and we are going to make the best of it. I'm too sick to get together with the rest of our family. We're going to have a bunch of family over and do Christmas Eve dinner here, but we had to, just cancel that because of the sickness. But whoa, thank you very much there. Some people are donating here. I really appreciate that. Too kind. Let's help him keep that dream, get that dream adventure. You know what, Jared? I'll tell you what, man. That's freaking inspiration. Jared just gave something here very kind to the channel, and wants me to do this adventure from the Mackenzie Mountains to the Arctic Ocean. So maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll get Ted in on it. He's a pretty good recruit. So we'll see. It might not be for another year or two, but I think it's in. I got it in me. So anyways, everybody, just wanted to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas, and thank you all. I can't tell everybody enough about how much I appreciate all your support, just watching the videos, sharing your thoughts with me in the comments, and just doing stuff like this, being able to kind of connect with people, have an authentic chat with everybody, answering some questions and all that kind of stuff. Really means a lot. So thank you very much. Happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas, and really appreciate everybody. So thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for joining me.